We talked about the road to Emmaus, and as Jesus joined along two individuals that was traveling down the road, headed back from the Passover. As they were headed back from that Passover time frame, they had seen Jesus. They had seen him, no doubt, being praised, and also seen him being pierced. They seen that he was on the cross, saw that he had died, was on their way back home, traveling to Emmaus, and Jesus come beside them, telling them, I'd just love to hear what Jesus had to tell them, rehearsing all the books and the pages of Old Testament leading up to his coming. Now here he was, and he said, just revealing to him who he was, and yet they couldn't see him. They invited him to stick around, and he said, well, if you're asking, I'll stay. And I found it fascinating that Jesus got something to eat. In fact, he ate something right there. He broke bread with them, meaning that it was a reminder. And whenever he broke bread with them, in the resurrected body, something happened. Immediately, they realized it burned within their heart. They knew who it was before them. All the pieces of the puzzle came together. And then Jesus vanished. That's a pretty powerful statement. He vanished. They got up the same hour, began to make their way back to Jerusalem. And as they go back to Jerusalem, we find ourselves here in part 2 of the story. Luke chapter 24, we're going to be looking at verses 36 through 43 tonight. And this is a study of the Scriptures. And I want to just read to you as we're going to walk this through a little bit more in depth and a little bit more in detail. But verse 36 says this. And those two individuals, they go back. They're telling they're going to go back. They're going to tell the others about what had happened. So, and as they thus spake, Jesus himself stood in the midst of them and saith unto them, Peace be unto you. Wow. I guess Jesus took that same road of traveling. And think about this. As they thus spake, now remember they're back there in the room. They're going to be telling the disciples about what they had encountered. They're going to be talking about that they were on this road. They was on this road to Emmaus, and a man came alongside of them, and they're just telling the story. They're just telling their testimony. They're telling their encounter with Jesus Christ. That's what a testimony is. And as they're telling this testimony, all of a sudden, Jesus shows up again. Now, they're behind, no doubt, closed doors, and how did he get in? It just seems like he vanishes at one point, and he appears at another point. Now, what I'm looking at in verse 36, it would give this same appearance that all this happened on the same day. On the same day being Easter. Remember that morning? They had gotten up. It was on the resurrection day. The ladies had told the story, but they began to head back home. And as they were, all this seems to take place on the same day, is what I'm getting at. And I want to read it again. And as they thus spake, Jesus himself stood in the midst of them, and saith unto them, Peace be unto you. What a beautiful statement Jesus said to them. You say, what's so big? What's the big deal about that? When Jesus says in the Hebrew shalom, it means peace. Peace be unto you. But it is going to take on a whole new meaning and a whole new context now, because they were always at odds and was separated from God Almighty. They did not have, but we as humanity, we have been separated from God. We are not at peace with God. We have been at odds with God. But as a result of what Jesus Christ did on the cross, we now can have peace with the Father. So when Jesus says these words to the disciples, it has a whole refreshing meaning to it, a whole new meaning to it. Just whenever he says, Peace be unto you. These words were now from Jesus, the risen Savior. and peace could come between God and man. Listen to what he says here in verse 37. But they were terrified and affrighted, and supposed that they had seen a spirit. There's something weird about this whole thing. They're scared now. And he said unto them, Why are ye troubled, and why do thoughts arise in your hearts? Behold, my hands and my feet, that it is I myself. Handle me, and see, for a spirit hath not flesh and bones, as ye see me have. When Jesus first displayed the wounds in his hands, we see here he's going to show them that he still bears the scars. He still bears the marks. He says, it is me. I'm not a figment of your imagination. I'm not some ghost. I'm not some transparent thing that you can look through and see through. I am physical. I'm not just spiritual. I am a physical resurrection. As he resurrected, it's important to note that he said, I'm the real deal. Check out my hands. Check out my feet. I'm him who was beaten, died, crucified, died, and was buried and risen again. And he's saying, I'm standing before you right now, just as I said I would. This is an amazing thing. Now, I wonder, because I'm sure you have thought as well, why are those scars still in his hands and in his feet? Why is that hole still pierced into his side and the markings there where he died? I've looked up a lot on this. To just tell you straight shooting, I don't fully know. I can just tell you what many other commentators have come up with and some of their suggestions. So let me read them to you. Perhaps the reasons why Jesus still has those holes in his, the markings in his hand, the scars in his hands, rather, or the holes, or whatever is there. We've seen many a picture of what people think. But to exhibit the wounds to the disciples, that they would know that this was indeed the very same Jesus. I mean, what if he didn't have the markings in his hand and the markings in his feet, and he come before them and he said, I'm Jesus? What would you say? Prove it. He could have told them by word. He could have showed them indeed. He could have done more miracles. He could have done more fascinating things. But there was a physical presence that they could see with their own eyes, that there was a obviously marking in each wrist, in each of his, in his feet, and in his side, that was a clear indication this is exactly what they did to Jesus. Who could be crucified and survive? You don't have markings like this and live to tell about it. So the other thing is this. Perhaps these markings are there to be an object of eternal amazement to the angels. That was a neat suggestion. To be his ornaments or his trophies of the great work that he has done for you and for me. To memorialize, the weapons to which he defeated death. He conquered death, hell, and the grave. And this was memorable for all to know so. To serve as advocates in his perpetual intercession for us. Maybe another one was to preserve the evidence of humanity's crime against him. I've heard it said, and perhaps you have too, the only man-made thing in heaven is the scars that was placed upon Jesus' body. You know, it is something to behold the fact that Jesus Christ died for you and for me. And it should be something that we should always remember, because without the death and burial are in vain if it wasn't for the resurrection. Now listen to what he says to them in verse 39. Verse 39, he not only shows them this, he gives them the invitation to check it out and to touch them. He says, behold, my hands and my feet, that is I myself. He said, handle me. He gives them the invitation. You touch me. Go ahead. If you think this is makeup, if you think this is some stick-on or whatever, try to rub it off. I'm inviting you. Feel this. This is no trick. This is no sleight of hand. This isn't an imposter. He's saying, I am who I say that I am. He says, handle me and see, for a spirit hath not flesh and bones, and ye see me as I have. Now, many have asked the question, why would he use the terminology here of saying that it's flesh and bones? Why would he not say that, check me out, I'm flesh and blood? There's a lot of theological aspects to say, well, did he actually have blood? Did he already spill his blood? The purpose for this clearly is what my opinion is that when you say flesh and bone, you can touch this flesh. You can feel those bones. He says, touch, feel, observe. I'm not just a spirit. I'm not just a figment of your imagination. It's kind of the old saying, pinch me. Make sure, am I dreaming? Is this real? It's very important that we recognize that, but yet still, even standing before them, hearing the stories, hearing of this, that the tomb was empty, having the angels there to say, go and tell my disciples, or go tell the disciples and Peter. They sent those ladies and they saw the angels. We have the guys that was on the road to Emmaus. They're coming back telling their story. And yet they're still, it's so overwhelming for them to comprehend this. And listen to what they said in verse 40. And when he had thus spoken, he showed them his hands and his feet. And while they yet believed not for joy. This right here, there's an old saying, this is too good to be what? This is too good to be true. I just can't believe it. I just can't believe it. Have you ever seen somebody win a whole big potload of money or win a new car or whatever? They just say, I just can't believe it. This can't be happening. This can't be real. Folks, that's the same kind of mindset. They could not comprehend this really happened. This is so beyond anything we could have imagined. He's alive. This is a wonderful thing. This is too good to be true. That same mentality was happening in Genesis 45 when Jacob could not believe that his son Joseph was alive. Do you know how many years Jacob grieved for his son Joseph, to which his brothers put into the pit? And then whenever news came to Jacob that Joseph was alive, he just said, I can't believe it. Something came within him and he said, I've got to go see it for myself. If you remember even Job in Job 19, he said if God would have answered him, he wouldn't have believed it. If God would have answered me in the way that all that happened to Job, and we could go through and just figure out, oh my goodness, when you think of heartache, and when you think of tragedy, you think of Job, and whenever you think about what God did in Job's life, Job would be somebody that would have said, I would have never believed it for the joy that I have today. In Psalms 126, it seemed too good to be true that God had again brought Israel out of captivity. And when Peter was set free from the prison, if you remember when Peter was in prison, he got out. The church had been praying. They were praying for Peter to get out. Peter gets out of the jail, walks to where the people were, knocks on the door. They open up the door and they said, who is it? And he says, it's Peter. And they said, well, it can't be Peter. We're too busy in here praying for him to be released. It can't be Peter. They couldn't believe it. And then they shut the door and said, who was it? Well, it was Peter, the guy we're praying for. Well, let him in. My goodness. It's that kind of joy that we should have. It's like hearing about somebody that you would have said it will take an act of God for that person to get saved. And you say, I'll have to, listen, I know that person. I know the life that they've lived. I know the lifestyle that they've done and so forth. I have to talk to them to see if they really got saved or not. And when you have that conversation with them, you just have to see it to believe it, because you can see that there was a change that happened in them. It was exciting times. So here Jesus is in the presence and he's giving them all this invitation, but they're so overwhelmed with joy, they just can't. Is this too good to be true? I just can't believe it. And then we go on and we see in verse 41, just continuing to read, and while they have yet believed not for joy and wondered, he said to them, hey, you got anything to eat? I know that John was a Baptist and Jesus was a Nazarene, but I think we got a little Baptist here in him. But you got anything to eat? I'm hungry. Think about that. I know I have. I got a good friend of mine, Todd, and we've often talked about, will we eat in heaven? You don't have to eat to live. We know that because you'll never die. You're going to be alive for all of eternity. But how many of y'all like to eat for just pure enjoyment of eating? I know I do. Just take a look, or just take a look and get. What'd you say, Mel? You just said just take.
Just look at me. You know I like to eat.
Yeah, just look at us. We like to eat. Hey, we meet, we eat. You know what? That's just part of it. That's a definition of baptism. It's got to be in the bylaws somewhere that you must have a fellowship meal included in our activities. Where do we get this idea? It must have been back here when Jesus got resurrected. But think about this. And while they yet believed for joy and wondered, he said, or while they believed not yet, he said to them, "Have ye any meat?" Wow. Why would he do this? Did he have to do this? No, I've already indicated to you that he did not have to eat. We're also going to see where he appears to them on the bank line and the bank shores there with Peter, and they're going to bring in some fish for a catch. And I also found that pretty fascinating too, that he didn't just eat, because I've often talked about being vegetarian, and we're going back to vegetarian as I'm a Genesis nut, but Jesus eats fish. And there's something to that whenever you think about him eating not just a fruit or vegetables or something, breaking of bread. He ate fish. So obviously they're okay for many people. They may call themselves vegetarian, but they still eat fish. That's another story or another topic for another day. But why would he do this? I believe, in my opinion, to demonstrate both his identity and that it really is more than just a spiritual body. But I believe Jesus ate, and I